Well, thank you so much to Yuki and the team for inviting me to speak about a topic which is dear to my heart. I know we were talking about doing a poll. I don't know if that is up in the chat, if we have that, Sneha.
Yes, I'm just launching it right now. I think everyone
Awesome.
have received it.
Oh, there it is. Very good. Yeah, this is just to get a little bit of a feel for where you are in your journey of building an online community. Some of you, I did take a look at all the attendance last night, as of last night, and many of you are community managers already. You're maybe in that process of building out. I am kind of curious if you have jumped onto the chat here. Maybe give a shout out of where you are and what your role is, and maybe what part of the world you're in. It would be great to understand that, and if you are part of a Web3 community, it would be also interesting to see as well. I've been on a journey into blockchain and Web3 for about the past year, and like all of us, we're educating ourselves along the way to understand what's possible. But today, just to introduce myself briefly, I run a consultancy called Clock Tower Advisors. I'm based in Wisconsin in the United States. I work with organizations and brands worldwide that are thinking of running an online community, or maybe have one and it's not performing in ways that they would like to. I've worked with organizations from very small startups all the way up to Fortune 100 types of companies. And I really enjoy the conversations involved with community building, because I think it's much more powerful than straight marketing or advertising as a way to engage with customers. It takes the power of the big social media platforms, but personalizes and privatizes those experiences in some important ways. And so my own story, when I started working in this space, was well, even before I started working in this space, was in the online gaming world. And I joined some online multiplayer games. There were discussion forums in those spaces, and I fell in love with the ability to collaborate and have deep, meaningful, connecting discussions with others. And so much so that stuck in my mind as the world of social media, the LinkedIns and the Facebooks and the Twitters of the world started coming online, started getting adopted. I was a very early proponent of talking about using those tools and platforms for businesses and organizations to collaborate and grow. And I've appreciated how our space of building communities online has grown up and formalized and developed all kinds of really great resources and materials around it for people to think and grow. I was a child in the 80s. That dates me a little bit, but one of my favorite bands is Rush, and the song "The Spirit of Radio" is always something that's stuck in my head. The lyric of all this machinery making modern music can still be open-hearted. And I think what we're trying to do with our internet technologies that we have today is to be open-hearted in our connections with each other. We're trying to break down the barriers that have kept us from having deeper, more meaningful connections online, which are possible. And some of the advances we've made about direct video discussions and ways for us to be connected across the world in a live video conversation, we shouldn't take those things for granted. We live in a science fictional reality right now that is amazing and connecting and empowering for all of us. And that ability to create spaces where we can all have those connections, safe spaces, trusted spaces, is incredibly important. So that's just by way of introduction, who I am and why I do this work that I do, because I enjoy helping organizations put together the strategy that works. Thank you so much to everybody that's putting in their comments about where they're from. I'm going to read back through those with great interest. Sneha, did you want to kick us off and talk through some of the questions that we had prepared in advance, and then we can maybe move to some of the open Q&A pretty quickly?
Yeah, of course. Just a minute.
Of course.
So for the discussions, I will drop in a few of the questions. Sorry, I'll drop in a few of the questions on the chat, so we can go about it.
Hi, Neha. It's nice to see you. I just saw Yeshua Ankar. Hello. Ronald. Hello. Lori, great to see you. Yeah, you guys can drop your LinkedIn's into the chat. I'll drop mine in there as well. Everyone is welcome to connect. I noticed when I was looking through the attendees last night that there were a lot of individuals, a significant number of individuals who are based in Nigeria. Has community management become a hot topic there? I'm really interested in how that's grown up. Oh, there we go. I see the questions, Neha.
Yeah. So yeah, I have like presented all the questions here. So I think we can begin. So we can start off with how do you define online community? What's your say on it?
Yeah, so I think, for any of us that have been in the community space for a period of time, we realize that communities need to be led by some kind of purpose or mission. They need to have the quality of preserving knowledge, meaning that it can't just be sort of a chat that goes by and disappears forever. There has to be some way to rediscover great content, to keep it saved to some place where you can get back to it easily, where it gets curated into some frequently asked questions or other kinds of documentation. Communities work best when there is some body of knowledge that develops around them. And then they also need to create a sense of belonging for members. So when we talk about online communities, I know there's a lot of definitions that are out there. And one of the things that I'm always doing when I sit down with a group of leaders or founders for an organization is to understand what their understanding of community is. What is it that got you to decide that you wanted to build a community? And then what are your ideas about what's going to come out of that? Because sometimes they'll have in their minds that it is a social media platform, and it kind of is. But I would argue that your social media account is not a community, that it is in fact something, it's maybe a front door to your community. It's a place to have some interaction, but your community is, if you think of it, it's not just simply the platform on which you're building. It's not just Yuki, but it's all of the entry points where somebody starts to encounter your brand, starts to talk about who you are and what you do, or what the purpose is for that place of belonging. And then they can join from those social media outposts to this more central place where they can have private, safe conversations with other people who share the same interests or values. Those communities that succeed need to be we-centric, and that's the title of the talk today. We-centric means that it's not about us, the business that's starting the community. It's not about them, the members who join the community, but it's about we. It's about that need to be serving the members as well as meeting the goals of the organization. I remember studying logic back in college. If you ever had to do the Venn diagrams, we've got two worlds that are overlapping when we're building any community model. And one of those worlds is what we need as an organization. What are the things we're trying to achieve? And the other world is why would members want to join us? What are they going to get out of it? What is in it for them? And the overlap is that area where there are mutually beneficial goals and outcomes. There may be things that you as an organization want that it's maybe not appropriate to have within the community. We need to be thinking about what it is that serves everybody to the best outcome for all concerned. I don't know if there's anybody on the conversation here today who is a member of the Rotary International, but it's part of the four-way test. What is the best thing for all concerned? Is it beneficial to all concerned? That's one of the key questions that I'm always trying to bring back with it. So I would just say that we need to make sure that those places we create are transparent, and I'll say more about that today, trustworthy, and safe. From the very level of the platform itself, in other words, does it feel like this is a well-designed user experience? Does the sign-up process not ask me for odd details about my background? Does it seem like it's a secure site or a secure app? Any kind of sign of sketchiness at the platform level is a problem. Any sign of distrustworthy, untrustworthy kinds of behaviors in terms of why an organization has created this community, that's a warning sign as well. So there needs to be a really clearly communicated reason publicly about why an organization has decided to start a community. And then you need to lay the foundations of trust for the members themselves. If I, as a member, join a community, I want to assume that the other people who are joining are equally trustworthy as me. They're there for the same reasons. They have kind of the same values or goals, and really understanding that that need for the safety between members is important too. So there's 3 levels there to really think about. So just to sum up, communities are about people, not platforms. They're about conversations, not advertisements. And they're about members and not audiences. So hopefully that helps. Sneha?
Yes. So I was thinking about the Web3 communities, as it's quite a hot topic right now. Web3 is growing and everything. So to our second question, is that definition any different than the Web3 world from online communities?
Yeah, so I like the question because I think it's the answer is ongoing. We're in very, very early days with community building with Web3. I think one of the things that I'm overjoyed about is that with the rise of the blockchain and decentralized autonomous organizations and the NFT trading world and all of that space, I think it's brought the idea of online communities to a much greater audience, a much broader audience. It has popularized the notion of setting up Discord platforms and Telegrams and WhatsApp spaces to talk about all the things that are going on in those spaces, to provide an environment for people who are enthusiastic about those things happening. So I think there's powerful opportunity for lessons around community building in those spaces. I think where it's maybe suffered to some degree is that maybe the community concepts haven't been thought through that well in some cases. One of the things that stands out for me that I always am sort of wondering in the back of my mind as I'm looking at a new NFT community that has sprung up is this more transactional than based upon some kind of clear purpose? If it's all about me collecting an NFT and then financially flipping it, trading it to be able to enrich myself, that's fine, but that's not really a good basis for a community, because the next person that buys that NFT doesn't necessarily share the same enthusiasms or the same interests for it. So I worry and hope that those organizations that are building their plans for NFTs or other kinds of blockchain style communities are really thinking about what is the long-term value, what kinds of interests, what kinds of values, what kinds of purpose are going to help people want to stay there and make it a more sustainable kind of experience. Because I think otherwise those communities could become seen as a fad or just kind of pass by the wayside very, very quickly. So I definitely want to be careful about that. I would also say that I'm looking forward to seeing more diversity in the adoption of platforms for Web3 style communities. I know that Discord and Telegram are super popular for those kinds of gatherings of people, but there are a lot of other great platforms out there, and I'm not shilling for Yuki because I'm not paid for any of that, but I think that there are some really good alternative platforms to think about before an organization just decides to jump in there. There may be a temptation for a Web3 organization to say, oh, well, we should go with Discord because that's where everybody goes, or that's what everybody's used to using. But just because people are used to using something doesn't mean it's the best place. I think we've seen something like this play out on Facebook, for example, where I see a lot of community professionals or a lot of organizations that are thinking about having a community will say, well, why don't we just do a Facebook group instead of having a dedicated community platform? Well, the problem is if everybody can create a Facebook group, it's easy to get people to come in and join and click join, but then getting visibility among the crowd of all the other people using those platforms gets a little bit more difficult. So hopefully I'm not trying to come down hard on Web3. I'm really excited about what's happening in the space. But I have a lot of hopes for it in the near future. Maybe before we move on to the next question, I saw there was a question from Neha out here. Neha, it's great to see you. So you're asking, so it's not your social media channel. It's tough to establish, especially when you scale. Yes. So what are my suggestions on how we can keep driving this? I would say, I tend to think of the relationship between your social media and your community. It needs to be defined. I tend to think of them as an ecosystem. They're interconnected and they're necessary for each other. The growth of your community is tied to your ability to acquire, new people in the platform, and a great source for getting them to join is your social media channels. The thing is, you can have a really terrific TikTok account where you have high interaction and people are talking about each of your new TikToks that you've put up. You can have what you might call a community in that space, but it's really a creator and audience dynamic that's in that space. Yes, they can respond to you there, and so there is some level of interaction. There is arguably some ability for community, but for me, that defining element is there's nobody that specifically owns that megaphone. You have somebody that joins an actual dedicated community platform, and everybody has a more or less equal voice, at least at the outset. So, so I think having a plan about how you're going to use each of your social media channels and how you're going to encourage people to join maybe the more central space. I think of it almost as if you've ever seen a chambered nautilus, like the sea creature with the shell. It's got all the different chambers in it that I think of in terms of progressively greater interest and involvement. If I've joined your other social media channels, I'm much more likely to join your community, and maybe that's part of your strategy for driving it over time. So Augustine says, I understand where you're coming from, but I do think creators, YouTubers are using Web3 in a purposeful way. Okay. Their fans buy NFTs and have a say in what content series should be developed, early access to specific events and products, which would be a great way for the creator and fans to build a deeper relationship. I don't disagree with you at all. as I said, I don't pretend to be aware of all the different plays that are out there, but it sounds like the YouTube creators you're thinking of or referring to there have found that sense of purpose, and they're looking at what is the driver of long-term value in those spaces. So absolutely. Sneha, should we move on?
Yeah. So also I had a question, like which source of social media would you suggest as a person who's starting off into Web3 communities per se? I've heard a lot that you do valuable contents on TikTok. Like, how is it helping you out?
So I'm sorry, I don't, the audio is a little muddy, so I'm not sure I caught the full question. So are you asking what channels are best to start on in social media to build community?
Yes.
Oh, that's a hard question to answer because it's going to vary by the kind of community you're looking to run. Like if you are, in B2B or B2C, those answers may be different. Particularly if you're a direct to customer kind of business, it makes sense to be on platforms like Instagram and Facebook. If you're looking for a lot of direct, grassroots visibility in a platform, you can't go wrong with TikTok right now. But more for B2B organizations, I would say a must is to build on LinkedIn to begin with, and have a strong company presence. So your mileage is going to vary. I can't answer that question too specifically unless I know a little bit more about the kind of organization or what they're trying to do.
All right. So moving ahead with our next question, how can community grow quickly? Can you tell us a little bit about Swift community, the concept of it?
Yeah, of course. So this is something that's come up in a lot of the consulting work that I've done over the years, that I'm finding very often that when I sit down with a leadership team, this is especially larger organizations, maybe Fortune 1000s or bigger, that they don't necessarily have a strong idea about what that community is going to do. They've heard about the power of online communities to create greater engagement, to improve efficiencies, to have more ideas about their products or services, to really, get in a deeper, better relationship with their customers. But they haven't really thought about how interesting that's going to be for those customers. Why would they want to join your community? And again, it comes back to that Venn diagram I mentioned earlier, making sure that you are overlapping your needs with the needs of your members that you're trying to reach. I find that putting it in these terms helps a lot, because they'll say, I want to grow this community fast. We think we want to get to this many members in 3 months or 6 months. Or maybe, and sometimes those are realistic expectations, sometimes they're not. It all depends on how closely that organization has identified something in the member that is tied to their identity, their beliefs, or their sense of purpose. The closer a community concept is built to survival or identity, the more likely it is to grow swiftly. And so that's that Swift community idea. Slow burn communities are maybe places you might check out if you need support for a product or service. There may be, some place that you might dip into from time to time, but you're not really likely to be going back very often. It's not directly tied to who you are. You don't feel like your tribe is necessarily there to really get them involved. And so really kind of spelling it out for a leader in an organization. If you're in the process of that conversation, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or in the chat. But really kind of laying out this spectrum for them. On this end is the Swift community. On this end is a slow burn. Where do you think you're going to fall in here? Because if it's tied to your lifestyle or to your personal beliefs or to your identity or if your survival depends on it, it's likely to grow swiftly. If it's, if your community is just about supporting your accounting software, and I don't mean to pick on the accountants out there necessarily, but it's hard to feel a sense of community around that unless it's tied to something a little closer to the heart. And so I think that's where a lot of organizations struggle, is they're trying to come up with that community concept. How do we get closer to the heart? I'm quoting another Rush song there, so I'm dating myself again. But that whole idea of finding what it is that's going to be an emotional pull on people to want to join. And I always kind of take it back to, our ancient ancestors in Neolithic times. Communities would form because they needed to survive. They were being trampled by the local woolly mammoth, or they all needed to get food. And so they decided to band together to hunt the woolly mammoth. So if you think about what's that driving need that you can tie to your community concept, you're much more likely to be able to grow quickly.
Perfect. If you have any questions, you can drop it in the chat below. We go further. So let's talk a little bit about what is minimally viable community and how can Web3 organizations plan for one.
So I'm going to move past this one pretty quickly. I'm just going to say, I did see there were a lot of community managers who were on here. They're probably aware of the community canvas. If they're not, communitycanvas.org. It's community-canvas.org. Is a great resource for building out your community concept. And especially the one-page document that they have, which is called the minimally viable community landscape. That one pager is golden, because I found again and again that it is helpful to drive those initial conversations about community with a leadership team. And it gives them something tangible that they can take back and hang over their desk or put up on the wall and have, an easy reference, so that as a leader comes back to you, and again, I'm talking about maybe larger organizations in this case, they can refer to that document and understand, oh, you know what, the core identity of this community is right here in the middle. The experience of the community is at the top of the landscape, and the underlying infrastructure or the governance or the financial side of the organization is accounted at the lower part of that community canvas. So if anybody needs that, drop a note down in the chat. I'm happy to share that with you. It is an open source resource. A couple of very smart people put that together, and I think it's definitely standing the test of time.
Okay.
Thanks for joining, Ronald. Good to see you.
Yeah. So we go to the next question. We are almost time up. We have to go for the discussion part, so we'll hurry up a little bit. The next question is about, when you work with organizations, what do you see as a key success factor?
I usually talk about 8 key success factors with community builds. One we've been talking about already, which is, how unique is the community concept? Is it valuable? Is there purpose driving it? Uniqueness needs to be tested. You need to validate whether that community exists anywhere else. Has another organization started it? Are there communities that are really closely adjacent to what you're building? Second one is, have you defined goals related to your business objectives? These need to be specific and measurable and something that you can quantify, but keep them tied to the business objectives, because that's key to setting expectations with your key stakeholders, which is number 3. So setting expectations with key stakeholders involves both defining what the metrics for success are, especially if your leadership team is interested in buzzwords like return on investment. You need to have that conversation up front before starting the community. and sort of understanding by what measurements you're going to be judged with what you do. Oh, see you, Neha. Hopefully you can catch it on the rebroadcast. The expectations also need to be set in terms of how soon that community is going to achieve value. Communities are generally a longer term investment, and so they're unlikely to yield a lot of return within the first couple of months. It might be 9 months or a year or maybe longer before they really get to where they need to be, especially if it's a slower burn community. And those are okay, by the way. It's just we need to set that expectation. Number 4 is valuing community management over technology. I will take a community with the worst technology, but good community managers any day of the week. I think that the people side of this business is the most important. It's easily overlooked. It's very tempting to just look at the technology side of things. And more often than not, I'll find that organizations that are planning to set up a community are really fixated on configuring the technology and the experience and making sure it's very white glove, all of which is good. But if you don't have a dedicated community manager, you're going to be in trouble. Number 5 is launching small and iterating. The tendency is to want to open it up to everybody, but I generally find that starting with a smaller group and then opening to progressively more people over time is a better way to build a community out, especially if you have some special interest groups or areas of the community. I see the tendency to want to build a lot of different spaces for people to have a lot of different interactions, but it's like a big ghost town when it opens up. There's nobody to interact. Start with a small number of groups or forums or discussion threads and work on building some momentum in those spaces with some good person-to-person conversations with a small group. And then as you bring more people in, that's really important. So how to keep people engaged and what techniques do we use? There's a whole discussion about that that I could get into, but you need to do a couple of different things. One is you need to make sure newcomers feel seen and heard. So having some kind of regular day or time or post where you greet them and make them feel welcome. Find out, maybe in one-on-one messages, what they're looking for, what kind of resources they need, connect them with other people that have the same or similar kinds of interests, and have regular events so they can interact with each other. So much of community right now is built on text interactions in a social media type venue, but I think increasingly those need to be married with either virtual live video events like this, or metaverse style meeting places, or live events. Those things are much more immersive than just straight text introductions, to each other. They're less intimidating, and they're a great way to build that sense of connection and engagement. So those are, I'm just kind of skimming along the very top of that, but I think that that's important to maybe delve a little further into in another conversation. Number 6 is really planning for growth and engagement. It's great to have people working on being engaged in the platform, but you also need to make sure that you have people continuing to come in over time. What will happen is if you just have one group come in and you don't have more grow, that participation will fall off over time. Even if you are trying to keep them engaged, having new blood come in will bring in people with new ideas, new needs. Some of the newcomers will ask annoying questions of the old comers that are there, but that's an opportunity to build a frequently asked questions space. So these are all important. Planning to engage over the entire member journey is another key success factor. So in other words, understanding that the member who just joined your community and is brand new needs very different things than someone who's been there for a while, or someone who is really a senior member of the community. There may be different activities they need. They may need special or private groups for certain kinds of discussions. And people coming into the community are likely to be coming in at different places as well. And then finally, quantifying, regularly measuring, and communicating success. I saw one of the questions that just showed up in the chat was around what are some metrics that define a successful community. I don't think I have any surprises there. It's time spent in the community. It's people that are actively participating. What their monthly average logins tend to be, daily logins. I'm definitely interested in that. Comments and likes are nice. There's a lot to be delved into in those kinds of questions, but really building out a plan for what you differentiating between what you see as indicating the health of the community. In other words, how much activity is going on there. I'm interested in those things as a community manager. Those are tactically interesting things, but then differentiating that story for your leadership or your stakeholders to talk about how the community is helping to meet business goals or key performance indicators for the business. That's a different set of metrics that you're looking at. And so it's worth some time to think about, both sets and how you're going to communicate, communicate the most important information to your product management department or your executive leadership team. They may be looking for a lot of different information. And so a lot of what you do as a community manager is you'll run around to those different departments, trying to make sure you're understanding what they're looking at and what they need, and talking and relating to them what's happening in the community so that they can understand and react and benefit from what you're able to create for them. So those are the 8. And Anatoly, you asked about how important is gamification. It can be important, but apply it with care. I would just say it is another engagement tactic that can be used effectively. Having game-like elements in your community is super important for some communities. For a game community, easy to implement. People are there for fun and games. For a cancer survivor community, gamification needs to be applied with great care. And maybe really downplay the badging elements or the points elements of those kinds of things. It needs to match the character and needs of the organization and the people who are participating in it. NFT memberships are getting popular. What are any thoughts on that? Ankur, yeah, absolutely. I think I'm very intrigued by this. I see great possibilities in decentralized credentialing to sign into communities, maybe based on an NFT. Maybe that is your pass card, or having access to special places within a community. I think that's kind of exciting because one of the common fatigue points that I run into again and again with communities is you launch a community, you have your members come in and they have to fill out a new profile every time they come in. That's fine because it indicates that they've maybe got a level of commitment, but most people don't have that. If I have my virtual wallet or my identity and I can pick and choose what elements of that I want to show up in a community, that's a lot faster for me to get somebody signed in and for members to see the interests of other members. If there's elements of their virtual wallet, other NFTs, basically collectors' receipts or proof of interest in different kinds of activities, that enriches a profile and makes it a lot easier for that community to get off the ground. I see so many communities that struggle with getting their members to even upload a profile picture of themselves. Really difficult to do. So I think there's tremendous promise in that. And I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface of that as a possibility. Sorry, Sneha, I went a little bit off script, but I think we still have one more question left.
Yeah, that was very insightful. So going ahead, so what do you think that the startups need to do differently when it comes to building an online community when the staff and the budget is very limited? What do you suggest we can do about it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a couple of things to consider. When you are a small staff, when you're a startup kind of organization, it's maybe your founders that are your initial community managers, and it's very easy to get sucked down the rabbit hole for that. I would say as soon as you can, find somebody to dedicate on the team to the community management kind of role. Yeah, absolutely, Ankur. Yes, token-based membership is really neat. So find somebody to get into that dedicated community manager role as soon as possible. It's not always possible to have a fully dedicated person to that in startup organizations. Maybe maybe you can do that. Maybe you have to have somebody in a shared role. If that is the case, you need to really try to get some kind of advocacy or super user group going as soon as possible to help bolster the participation in the community. Enlist them as volunteers to aid you in that process of making newcomers feel welcome and heard, and getting some of those initial conversations going. That will require planning a program around that. Try not to succumb to the temptation of automation. I'm not a huge fan of automation. I'm a bit of a curmudgeon when it comes to that. I don't really feel the conversation easily scales or can easily be automated. So I'm distrustful of those things. There are no shortcuts to building community. It is the hard work of reaching out and getting to know one person at a time. And it will build, it will eventually scale as more and more people realize what you're trying to create, and they will sense your intent of what you're trying to build and create in that space. So you need to examine your own motivations for building these spaces out. You need to be visible, you need to be active, you need to be transparent about the purpose of the space. Excuse me.
If we have any more questions, we'll be going about 20 more minutes.
So I have a quick question, Todd. Thanks for doing this, and it was super insightful. Quick question is, what are your thoughts regarding a chat-based community tool versus a forum-based community tool? Which would be a right fit for building your own community? And if does a chat-based tool, is it a better fit for a Web3 product versus forum-based tool? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and I would add another category to that, because I think there's the chat-based communities, there's forum-based communities, and then there's more what I would almost call like a private social media community, and so that has a stream of updates, but it's not as real time as a chat-based community. I like all three for different reasons, but I think if I'm thinking about a chat-based community, I want to make sure that my member base is going to be accustomed to that. And what I mean by that is if it's a community that's familiar with online gaming and they're used to playing in Discord or Slack, that they get how that experience is organized, and they're okay with the streaming nature of all the communications that go by. That being said, if I were working with an older demographic, and I have with different groups in Wisconsin where I'm based, it can create a lot of stress for them, and they may never even adopt the tool in the way that you might hope to have them do so. Forums have been with us forever. I think that they're a great way to rediscover knowledge. They're potentially really good for SEO. You can have in-depth, long-form discussions, in those spaces. So if you're dealing in a community of practice, or you've got like a really hobby-based community where people get deep, I would consider maybe using that. And the social media-based communities, things like Disciple or Mighty Networks or Circle, those are great because I think most people immediately wrap their mind around, oh, this is kind of like a Facebook platform, or the stream works that way. And so it's immediately familiar to them, as some things to use. So that's kind of how I, sort of separate them out in my mind as I think about them. Great question, Ankur.
Thanks. That was super cool. Thanks.
So we have a question coming up. How would you categorize educational community? All members are ex-students, and community tool is continue learning new topics. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you're maybe describing a sort of a community of practice where people are studying a particular topic or trying to get better, or they want to enter a profession, together. Categorize, I'm not sure what you mean by that necessarily, Anatoly, but, I think that those communities tend to burn more slowly because they are based on self-improvement and can be tied to identity. But I'll generally find that those kinds of communities are more likely to have people that maybe sign in once a week, or if they're engrossed in a course, an e-course where it's cohort-based learning, where there's a group of them coming together, it could become quite powerful because then they've got that shared experience and chance to bond with one another and form some deeper friendships and ties with each other. But if it's just more of sharing information, resources, ideas, technical data, that tends to burn a little bit more slowly in my experience. So I've done a fair amount of work in communities of practice, and so I really like that space a lot. Oh, I think Anatoly wanted to jump in on the audio there.
Yes. Anybody have any other question? We are open for discussion. I guess a lot of participants could not join today because of the time differences. So I will be recording this video for them because I have received a lot of DMs saying they couldn't make it due to the time difference. And so they asked if we can record it. So I guess it'll be helpful for them. We have a question coming up.
Oh, yeah. Do you have any advice for community managers who are a one-man band? That's more often the case than not. So I would say you need to join one of the many peer groups that are out on the web, whether it's Community Club or CMX, or there are many. Yuki, I'm sure has their spaces as well. But someplace where you can share sort of your day-to-day needs or frustrations, and collaborate with other people that are in the space. It's really important that you not feel alone in that. And you need to protect your own mental health. You need to set some boundaries for yourself, because it is very tempting when you are starting up and you are a one-person show to try to be on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year, and you just can't do it. You'll destroy yourself. And so you need to take great care to protect your mental health and wellness, and take breaks, get up and get away from the computer, get outside. That's critically important. The other thing is, as a one-person community manager, you'd be spending a lot of time working with other people across the organization, because many of them won't understand, what your part is or what you're trying to do. It's a pretty new profession, relatively speaking. And even though maybe it's approved from the very top of your organization, you may need to even spend some time re-educating them about what's actually happening in the community, what the health is of that space, and helping them to see on a week in, week out basis what you are doing that directly supports their major business objectives and things that they're trying to accomplish. And that's not just the quantified metrics, it's also qualitative information, anecdotes, stories about things that have gone really well. What was a great interaction? What was somebody's problem that was solved? How did you make their life better by having them be a part of the community? And really, telling those stories internally is important. So you are the official collector of stories and bard, singing the praises of what's gone well in that community space. It's an exciting job, but like I said, you've got to protect yourself.
All right.
Yeah, I have another question. So, when is the right time for to move to your own private label community platform? Say you're building a community on Discord, Slack, or Facebook group. What is the ideal time? So, number of users, or the amount of engagement, or in what part of your journey it's better to transition to a white label product? Is it based on the product or the community you have, or on the number of users you have?
So I'm not sure, like when you said the transition, there's a little bit of unclearness in the audio.
Yeah. So the idea here is you're building out a community on a third-party tool like a Discord, Slack, or Facebook group. Say you want to use a white label community platform like Yuki or the others like Circle or Mighty Network. What is the right time? Is it based on the vertical you're servicing, or is it the number of users?
Yeah, so it's a great question. My gut feeling is, like, if you're on something like Discord, which is very chat based, it can become very stressful. Like once you start reaching a large number of people, and it doesn't even have to be that large a number of people, you've got a lot of channels, you've got a lot of chat that's kind of streaming by really quickly. That's extremely stressful. I don't care how used to it you are as a gamer, kind of seeing this feed going by all the time. If it's starting to feel frantic, if you're feeling stressed, every time you log into that platform, it may be time to think about migrating to something that is going to not be quite so frantic as an experience. So I would definitely look at that. So that's got to do with your level of member, your number of member posts per day, things like that. I don't have a hard and fast number for you around that. I mean, I think your mileage is going to vary a little bit. I'm generally not a fan of having sort of starter community spaces, but I think it happens a lot where somebody says, well, we're going to start on Facebook groups and then we'll migrate, to a white label solution at some point, or we're going to start on Discord and then we're going to go to, Mighty Networks or Higher Logic or Yuki or, I would almost rather, as they're planning that community, that they think about what is their audience size going to be, like that they want to become members of the community. And I mean, if you're talking about, more than 500 people, which in most cases you are, I would probably want something that's a little more of a social media or a forum platform at the outset, rather than just starting on the chat space. I have seen some communities that have decided to actively maintain Slack and a forum. That's a lot of management. It's a lot of overhead to do something like that. There's a lot of decisions to be made around those kinds of moves. And then if you're going to make that kind of move from one platform to another, those migrations aren't necessarily easy. Are you going to maintain any of the backlog of interactions or conversations that happened in the first platform? Are you going to try to migrate that data into the new platform? Or are you just going to start from scratch? Because that's like starting a community from brand new. There's a lot of change management considerations to be had if you're thinking about making that kind of move.
Thanks for the insight on this. Yeah.
Of course. Thank you.
Well, if you have more questions, you can drop on the chat below. We have about, I guess, 4 minutes more. If you have any more questions, you can like drop it via LinkedIn or Facebook. We will get them answered and send it to you. Well, thank you, Todd. Thank you for joining for this webinar today. And we have our founder of Yuki, Ankur. To a little bit talk to us about what Yuki is all about.
Yeah, thanks, Todd, for having a session with us and sharing your insights and your thought process regarding how to handle and build community. And now moving towards Web3, as a lot of us are testing waters and how we can build our products, build our communities in the Web3 space. It's super insightful, and we're learning together. In the last 2 years, we've transitioned from a purely hybrid model to a complete online model as well in building communities. And yeah, so in that, we organically built a product called Yuki as an internal tool to manage our community. And we thought it would be sort of valuable for others as well, who are building communities for their products as influencers, as people in support, or to people in Web3. So creators in Web3 and educators. So we built Yuki as a white label community platform where you can host your discussion, polls, host live events, showcase your work, interact with your community, now have integration for Web3 products, integrate your wallet, NFT memberships, run your recurring subscriptions as well. And yeah, we have now around 1,500 communities being built on UP in different verticals. And yeah, happy to help out in sort of organizations, creators, influencers to grow the community. We do have integration with the existing platforms like Telegram, Discord, and others. So you don't have to sort of focus individually on these platforms. So it can be a one-place solution for you to manage all these communities as well. Thanks again. And yeah, we do have some offers. If you do want to buy the subscription, there is a discount code. I think Sneha will mention the code over email as well as in the chat. And yeah, thanks Todd for doing this. And I think we're looking forward to more sessions like this to learn together on how to build a great community and engage actively with the community members.
Yeah, Todd,
thanks.
it was amazing having you on this webinar with us. We are looking forward to have you more for our future events, for sure. We are also planning to have like a podcast with you. That would be perfect. Well, thank you everybody for joining on this webinar today. If you have any questions or if you would like to have a one-on-one session with Todd, you can like DM me or probably can DM him on the LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciated the opportunity to chat with everybody today about one of my favorite topics.